these flat walls like this surrounding it. And I don't know if this is just that. Because I don't know what the fuck this is about. Yeah, it's like Liminal hotel stuff. It's just like a room is empty and I'm now shitting myself.
This is your operator, under duress. In the words of painter Brian Geisen, it's been a long, dull wait. Yeah, if only. That thing about ancient Chinese curses and living in interesting times, it's a myth. I type as I look over at my cat, hunkering and paranoid underneath one apartment in a tall cat multiplex. There's a whole chain of unrelated profundities dancing along behind that one, some of which I have documented and others which are lost to forgetting. Forgetting being an antithesis of memory. Mnemonic is not a word. Unmemory or some such is absent too. That's funny. Funny like I clown, amusing myself. This is the Earth Hotel, an existential diskette, a mime in a shallow grave, a demonstration of grievance, a show about a zone arranged about borrowed time, if not always a good use of it. I am your host, trying to not become a ghost. Jackie Cotillard. That's Jackie, like the supplanter with bad heels. That's Cotillard, like hard fronting with a heavy chain mail. And now for the entertainment part of the show. Though in contrast to televisual late-night fare, I prefer to think of our time together as exit-tainment. It's been a minute. The schizoid leaps in me, as much as a schizoid can leap within a body. Hope, like a very concerned fish at the notion of time gone past. A singer told me once, "You know what, you should get an agent." Oh yeah? Yeah. Why sit in the dark, handling yourself? At least I thought he was talking to me. I still do, but I used to too. I should have taken his advice. I was having a wonderful time, but now I am in the dark. Seeing, kind of like seeing when you rub your eyes and everything turns that sort of whitish amber color. Whistling, like I can whistle, which is haphazardly, in the dark. Are the headlights moving outside the beginning of the horror? One can't tell. My name is Jackie, and we're heading into what is actually a fun talk and a good interview, like two kind strangers skipping stones across a pond for a sunset and then parting to their adventures. But, you know, the urgency, the dread and happenings. Apologies for my absence. Believe it or not, a real-life hotel has, for the last many months, occupied all of my attention, distracting me from the more real-than-real hotel. And after all of it, I've had the displeasure to watch, at least in my quarter of the cube, the surrender of this industry to contactless service and AI-driven processes, so that's something. But AI can't make a room appear like you're the first one to ever enter it. And I suppose now, neither can I. Let's take me slightly out of time. Serving in a lobby is something that's only existentially significant to me. My current charge is much smaller than I had expectations for, with a very large painting that dominates one wall. A hotel full of portraits of blind women, or at least blindfold, or depending on the archetype style, severally reproduced portraits of a femme nude, turned away and, of course, silent. They should have called it the Cassandra Hotel. It is when these paintings start speaking that I will begin to wonder. I guess in this case, wonder if their words contain predictions. Sure, it unnerved me somewhat when I came on board, head half buried in stacks of ancient languages, to find myself in a daily dance with a hotel with 22 rooms, one for each object letter that cavorted from Phoenician to Hebrew by euphemism of place. That I took very well, I'm sure, like a normal person. How many gates did I pass through in those 10 months in that building? 22? 44? Or a much larger number lost to time, never counted? Or perhaps just one? There's much to say about all this. It's been very thematic, it's been very hotelness, and I'm still making sense of everything, but for now I should want only to get this burden off of me. Sitting on this charming interview and all besides for far too long. But we can't tarry too much about lost time. So on with it. My guest this week specializes in liminal spaces. That is the local and regional photography of them. He's the sort of chap that I love to happen upon by sheer fortune and invite to the desk to meet for the first time, only to find myriad warm connections to other wonderful people and kindness that comes direct and unreserved. Another many-pronged artist with a mind that has dwelt in music and design, the abstract and arcane art of business, and that which has a wealth of interesting experiences to share. You can go perusing beneath for links to music and art and other, and then after this show, you can find a subsequent one to spool out some of these threads a little further. Much to come, but for now, it's a pleasure to at last welcome, after a choice and coincidental cut from his catalog, and kindly put your bones thrice together for my guest, Shawn Avery.
Yeah, feng shui, as far as I understood it, was just like the specific alignments of objects in a space. You don't want your bed facing the bathroom door. There's stagnant water nests coming in from the bathroom, and you don't want to have to deal with that while you're sleeping. So it's like principles like that and cardinal directions and things.
Right. Eastward is a factor.
Yeah, I've read papers on the magnetic field created by the earth pulling on our blood.
Right.
If you sleep in a direction where that's going to pull blood into your feet, I don't know whether or not that's a valid thing.
Kind of ties into the whole grounding thing, which I'm curious. I'm grounding curious. You know, put my bed on the ground, see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a logic to that.
Yeah, we quickly get into a dynamic that is also at the heart of the idea of place, of what place is. It's all conversation with yourself. What you feel about a place, how you define it in relation to yourself, is an ongoing conversation that's contextual. And so is where your bed is in your room, how you're sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
I've been rotating my bed periodically without any kind of like scientific mind. I'm not notating the differences in my sleep or tracking anything. It's very like anecdotal, this experimentation on how my sleep is affected.
That's interesting. I've done that not based on how I feel when I go to bed, but based on how I feel when I wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Like my bed in my bedroom hasn't changed in 13 years. But early on, when I was first renting the house before I bought it, my bed was in a couple different places, and it mattered where the window was, where the sounds of the birds are in the morning. I would rather have noises wake me up from the left. I used to do like the blackout curtains and no light. The older I get, I guess maybe my depression, psyche, things shift. I need sunlight. I need something circadian happening. So I actually welcome light to wake me up, but I need it to come from a certain direction. I need the orientation of that. The first thing I say, or when I'm rolling over in the morning, knowing that the sun is up, it'll affect me a certain way on, like, I just feel good if light and noise is coming at me from the left. So that's where my bed is sat versus the window.
Do you have hearing issues? I know you play drums. So.
No, I mean, I probably do.
But not like weighted one side or the other?
I don't think so. I'm left dominant. It's the only thing I can think.
Do you set the drums up left-handed? Or
Left-handed.
Okay.
Yeah, I play guitar right and bass right-handed. Everything else. As a left-handed person, obviously you live in a right-handed world. So
right.
Every left-handed person is ambidextrous. But drums is the only instrument where I set up left-handed. It makes no sense.
Do you sing right or left-handed if you go for a microphone?
I tend to sing right-handed. No, I tend to not sing whenever possible.
You got some vocal credits. I did a little research.
Okay. Yeah, a little background vocals here and there.
There's a concept in a number of cultures where there's not a word for left or right. If you're facing a specific direction, you have a north foot and a south foot. But if you turn, it's a west foot and an east foot.
I've often wondered as a left-handed person if my whole concept of everything isn't skewed because we're forced to live in a right-handed world. Like maybe we're more centered. Maybe our orientation doesn't necessarily give way to left or right because we have to deal so much with this non-dominant side that doesn't feel natural to it. Like I cut scissors with my right hand because I was taught to. But right-handed people who are given the privilege of every object, every entryway, every portal, everything, automobiles, machinery, instruments, are they just really weighted on their right-hand dominant side because they haven't been forced to address the opposite? So are left-handed people more balanced in a way? I don't know.
Yeah, almost like a gyroscope has interior recursive balancing going on. We were talking before, Mike, the inertia of staying home versus the inertia of being used to going out and how COVID changed that. Yeah, the inertia, the sink of not having resistance built into space, like because I'm right-handed, but I also do things ambidextrously. But I definitely don't feel that resistant strain built into things. Interesting.
And I feel like being left-handed and being forced to use other implements different ways and the world in a different way, I feel grateful that I have been forced to. Literally, Miss Adams in first grade, like putting the scissors back in my right hand over and over until I got it, which seems, it's forceful, and it is, but it's not like my dad, who came up in the 50s and was left-handed, and they literally tried to change his writing hand, which I'm sure that was emotionally helpful.
Yeah. The history of that goes a lot worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does.
When you're having that impression of that scissors being pressed in your hand, can you relate that to the space that you were in?
I mean, I remember that homeroom. It was actually in a modified double-wide trailer because the elementary school had outgrown its traditional room. So there was a whole row that lined up, I guess, by the PE outside area. And I remember it's the only part of the day where I had to walk up a few stairs to get into the room. Like I associate that room as being floating above because it literally was above everything else. And I actually have great memories about Miss Adams. As far as I remember, I think she was a teenager. I think she was like an 18, 19-year-old teacher just teaching these kindergartners and first graders and just doing the best she could. Taught me to tie my shoes. I remember her being really sweet, but I remember her saying, not saying, but like kind of saying, let's try this in your right hand. And now, even though I'm very confident with my motor skills and all that, I can't imagine using scissors with my left hand. There's just no way.
So in the last interview I did with Micah, she mentioned like neurological extension of tool. And I linked a study on that episode about wheelchairs. Neurologically, we adapt to how much space that takes up as we are included in our proprioceptive moving. And it's interesting there being an active resistance to, I'm not going to extend that way. Tool is not going to extend this part. Is that anything?
I mean, I can relate just in terms of my own body and how that's changed over time. I used to take up a lot of space with my activity. I felt very tied to my dirt bike, BMX, motorcycles, all that growing up. I felt like I needed to be moving through space fast. I needed to be doing something active and kinetic often. And the older I get, the more I happily make myself just kind of curl up. I cross my legs like this now, tight versus open like this. No one told me to do that. I'm a white guy in America. You know, there's a implied privilege there for me to sit however I want to sit. Nobody's going to call me on it. But the older I get, the more I just feel better, I don't know, folding into myself a little more. And it's not because anything's happened to me. I mean, I'm older, I'm 50, but there's definitely something internal where I have moved very far away from kinetic life to a kind of wrapped up. I like to observe more in a room than I used to. I still talk a lot, but I like to observe what's going on. I'm totally comfortable being at a party. This is a recent example. There's 14 people in the kitchen, 10 people out on the porch. There's a few people walking around. I'm the only person in the living room on the couch. I'm listening to what's being said. I'm enjoying myself, but I'm back here. And even though I have all the space in this entire room to sit any way I want, I still feel like I can think and exist better if I'm just a little bit smaller.
I associate that with there's a lot of Buddhist language of collecting in, like laying out mindfulness in front of you, or encompassing other things with mind, other people or other spaces.
You may have put your finger on it. The older I get, the more I do a lot of mindfulness things, done a lot of therapy. I am interested in Buddhism, and I feel like my mind is quieter than it used to be. I'm perfectly happy sitting in a room staring at a wall for 4 hours, just thinking. And I'm not sad thinking. I'm not ruminating. I'm not going down some overthinking spiral. I'm just happy just being. And I think that might play into how I sit and feel in a room now is that I'm so much happier with what's going on inside emotionally, intellectually than before. Maybe I didn't have anything like that, and that's why I was such a kinetic kid, such a kinetic young adult, whereas I'm not now.
That is described as a product of consistent mindfulness, the various jhanas that you go through. And the first one is the rapture of contemplation.
Oh, yeah.
Of self-containedness.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny. I got recommended your Instagram, the Liminal stuff. And I just thought that was fascinating that you were in town, lived nearby doing this stuff, recognizing spaces in Birmingham that were done this way. And then I did my digging, and it's like, oh, you go back with Comvest folks.
Sure.
Communicating Vessels, the label. You run your own label. I mean, you played music since the early 2000s. I didn't get into Birmingham music until...
You nailed it.
2014, 2015 is about when I got here, so...
Did you ever get a chance to... Was Bottle Tree still...
For like
a minute?
3 months.
Yeah.
I saw Sue Scrofa there, and I think that was it.
Yeah.
And then that was the end of it.
I didn't realize this until I thought about coming out here. I don't know, I guess within the last week I've realized that I started playing when I moved here right after 9/11. Grew up in Central Florida, went to school in Florida, lived in Orlando, Miami, St. Augustine, Jacksonville, all over the place. Lived almost 3 years in Phoenix with my longtime partner, and that went south, and I was out of money and options, so I moved to Birmingham where my mom had transferred. And to keep myself interested and alive, I started playing in bands, and then before you know it, 20 years goes by. And I didn't really realize this until recently. COVID was a factor. Getting older was a factor. But I basically kind of walked away from music, or at least live performance, at exactly 20 years in 2022. Didn't pivot, but started dedicating real time to the photography at about the same time. Like that account started in January of 2022. And of course, now it seems obvious to me what I was doing. I was taking stock of all this photography I'd done over the past 20 years and wanting to make sense of it, wanting to sort of curate it, rediscovering the joy that I got from photography, reminding myself of how kind of a bummer the music scene had become. Not the scene, but the grind of it. So there was an ending and there was a beginning. I hadn't thought of that at all until the past week.
It's interesting that happened during perhaps one of the most liminal times that we've experienced. Talk about empty spaces and disruption.
Absolutely.
And that was about 2022, as we were exiting that, at least the lockdown portion of it, was about the time that the liminal space phenomenon got mainstreamed. How far back are you familiar? What's your history with that, like the online aspect of it?
I actually go back to, I guess you would call him an influence on me, especially now that I've posted enough work to kind of see that I gravitate toward light in a certain way. I gravitate toward colors in a certain way. But when I moved to Phoenix, we would often try to escape the blandness and the heat of the city and go up to Flagstaff, where there was a soul and there was a vibe and cool air and snow. We discovered Jim Terrell's Road and Crater, which was in its 20th year, who knows, of being carved out to the largest earthwork man's ever created. And of course, you can't get close to it, but we took out telephoto lenses. We would sort of stalk it. We would notice trucks rolling up and moving dirt. And then right before I left Phoenix, in Scottsdale, the museum, they opened up like a wing for him, like a sort of an observation patio type thing where light comes in and it plays tricks on your eyes. And you start feeling light in a different way. And they had curated some spaces for him. One, you have to actually be in there for almost an hour before your eyes adapt enough to where you see the super faint light and shapes that are coming in. So that kind of crept in at some point, again, way, way below talking about it or even being aware of it. So over the next decades, if I was traveling or if I was even just downtown Birmingham where I've worked for 20 years, emptiness, lack of people, light doing its own thing, not even necessarily interesting patterns, but interesting light, a tunnel, whatever. I started gravitating toward that. So I guess it started with Jim Terrell and his contemplative liminality, where you have to sit in a space for a certain period of time for the effect of the space to work. As far as the online stuff, about when everyone else, 2022, I was aware of the back rooms and people doing tributes to the back rooms, examining the back rooms, the ever ridiculous funness of building upon the back rooms. There were some that I thought were ridiculous. There were some that I thought were amazing, like the pool rooms.
Have you seen Kane Pixel's stuff?
Yes. Just brilliant. And how these kids can do that on a laptop in a fairly short amount of time with not a lot of software, and the layering of the spaces to make it look not only indecipherable from reality, but to bring on that hazy, glitchy component that I assume the people making it, that are at least 20 plus years younger than me, see it from this rich visual. It's doing something for them. Of course, me coming from early 90s with film, learning darkroom techniques, learning complex color darkroom techniques, just in time for digital to come along and do away with all the techniques I learned, I view that in a different way. But I appreciate that they are sort of absorbing what might be the final wave. I don't know this, but what might be the final wave of that glitch, artifact, imperfectness that we've all taken for granted our entire lives. Like when you see in a film and someone's going through a memory montage. Well, that memory montage is probably going to be in 16 millimeter. It's probably going to have light leak. It's probably going to be imperfect because that's shorthand for separating you from the present, which is now, the assumption is the present is more perfect visually. Well, we're getting to the point now with our phones and media, everything else, there's not a lot of imperfect, glitchy vibiness left. So kids that are coming up now, in 20 years, what is their glitchy, vibey imperfectness in their media going to be? Their options are kind of dwindling.
Right.
So with the back rooms, there's the space and what the space represents and all that, which is deep. But visually, just seeing a photograph of the back rooms, not wandering through the video that someone has shot or has built. To me, it's also a celebration of the pending ending of the glitchiness. And I kind of feel bad for everyone else in the future. You're not going to have dust on your negatives that you have to clean off. You're not going to have faulty emulsion paper. It's interesting. It's very Brian Eno.
Yeah, I was just thinking about his statements on the griminess of tech and how that introduces things.
And it becomes a fetish, for sure.
Yeah, and then you get algorithmically reproduced glitch filters and stuff like that.
Right. The other day I was editing an image, little Photoshop app on my phone, and I was like, I wonder if I can make this pendant light disappear from the ceiling. And I pressed the button and boop, and it's gone. And I was like, isn't that cute? Later on, I was editing a similar image to that same shoot in Photoshop, and I was like, you know what, I could just select this and do some smoothing and get rid of this background, but you know what? I want to do the work. So I hand erased all the way around it. That took 15 minutes, and it was tedious, but it just felt right. It felt like I was in 1996 again in Photoshop class, learning how to do stuff. Same thing in Pro Tools. I can get scattered, weird rhythmic effects from 20 different sources, plugins, but I can also just copy and paste this weird ghost note from the drums and then do a fade out and just literally manually create the glitch. And to anyone else, it's probably going to sound like, oh, he used a stutter effect in this plugin. But I know that I went in and did this hokey late 90s sampling technique. So when I hear it, I know that there's kind of retro sound design craft in there a little bit.
It almost allows you to see those parts that you're working with in a close-up kind of resolution that you wouldn't otherwise. You have to get close to that detail in order to cut it out. You have to zoom way in to clip something in or where otherwise you would just offhand at a distance
Right.
manipulate it. You brought up light, bringing emptiness and space about. This is an inevitability. How is your visual imagination when you're trying to picture a space that you've been in before, like we were talking about your grade school? What kind of fidelity, what kind of visual characteristic does that have internally when you're picturing it?
Like every place I've ever lived, definitely school classrooms, my office, which features prominently on my account. I feel like I can get down to the dust on the table. The townhouse my mom rented in 1979, I can tell you the shade of yellow in the pantry by the back door. But there's other spaces where I associate it more with like a glow. Like there's some photos on my account where it's obviously an empty space downtown somewhere, but there's this green or orange or blue. There's like this kind of humming glow that's been added to it. Sometimes a room will do that. Like if it's void of detail or I can't remember details or I'm not feeling that, the space is then filled by this light glow. It's probably the closest I'll ever get to synesthesia, which I'm super jealous of everyone who has it. And I know people who have it. Yeah, it takes on like a humming, sometimes a purpley, magenta, sometimes orange, sometimes very cyan, sometimes green.
What brings that about? Is it emptiness? It's lack of adhesion to content?
I think it's just the vibe it gives me. Obviously, certain rooms, the way the light hits it, are going to, and most walls are going to be white. I try to imagine spaces as being influenced by the light that's in them. For instance, a lot of the lighting downtown has moved to LED, but there's still some old school like sodium light, light that if you're using a daylight white balance as your baseline, it's going to feel really green or it's going to feel really yellow. Of course, if you're walking by at night, you're walking by bars, especially older, vibier places, it's going to feel very tungsten. It's going to feel very orange. So obviously I'm going to associate rooms with their lighting, but even when the lights are off, like let's say it's during the day and it's only getting sunlight, I'll still try to imagine its inherent glow, its inherent color based on what light has been lighting it. Maybe that's where the glow thing comes from. I'm getting more sensitive, just like the glitch thing and the fact that things are becoming more and more perfect and future generations are going to be probably robbed of the fetishy glitchiness that we're accustomed to. Same thing with LED light. Like I've just noticed it 2 decades I've lived downtown. Buildings are lit differently. My building, the Tidal building, still has these really tungsteny yellow lights that shine on it at night. But so many lights now are perfectly balanced. And when they show up in a photograph, it's just blank. There's no of that light aura anymore. It's just completely neutral.
There's an increasing trend of vibrantly colored lights in different spaces publicly to, blue produces calming effects or otherwise.
And the extreme literal institutionality of it when it's applied, like light pastel pink supposedly being used as a calming mechanism for certain incarcerated populations. My favorite color in the past several years has been magenta. I love hot pinks, which is interesting because I started out very monochromatic, or as I was reminded, the proper term is anachromatic. But the idea of a pastel pink room, especially with nothing on the walls, that's it? That's startling to me to even ponder. Supposedly the psychology involved in a prisoner population, some kind of light shade pastel pink is going to calm them. What was the testing involved? Like, who were the populations? What were the batteries? What were the criteria? What were the colors that lost out? What were the colors that were deemed less relaxing to an inmate than pink pastel?
Is that better or worse than gray?
Right.
Yeah. I love brutalist
Same.
architecture. And one of my greatest fears is being incarcerated. It's weird.
Yeah. Did you see The Brutalist, the film?
No, I haven't yet.
I thought it was absolutely gorgeous from beginning to end. But one thing that's implied early on becomes a little bit more heavy-handed toward the end. And, of course, it's written about plenty. There's no spoilers in this. Is that the main character, the architect, who was a composite of 20th century brutalist designers pre- and post-war, designed a lot of his rooms to replicate the sense of restraint, the overall claustrophobic vibe that he had experienced while he was interned.
Right.
It's weird when you have to admit that there's a beauty to some spaces that are reminiscent of that, but you can't help it. There's absolute beauty in a space that's 27 feet high and 4 feet wide.
Yeah.
Especially when you incorporate the light.
Right. Some of the oldest architectural Neolithic sites that we have, I just stumbled onto the Newgrange site in Ireland, which is like 3200 BC. It's massive horizontal earthworks. One of the only times I've ever looked at an image, maybe it's ancestral, and went, oh, I have to go there.
Yeah.
I'm drawn there. One of the examples of celestially aligned space where sun enters this long passage at a certain time. It doesn't work anymore because it's 5,000 years off.
Right.
But they've replicated that with relays and stuff. So Irish citizens and scientists win a lottery, and every year they do that on the solstice. They simulate that and they get a show.
Interesting.
There is something very compelling about the long passage where light eventually only comes sometimes, waiting for light to enter a space and being changed by the experience of that. So you've got the strong visual capacity, and it's interesting you went to extra body kinetics. Talk about dirt biking, moving through a space where your interior space is pretty contained and pretty stable, but it's the interior exterior over distance.
Or you're not pondering your interior space at all.
It all gets folded back into this is just body. You ever done lucid dreaming type practices?
I was talking to my partner about this last week, and my guesstimate was I get lucky and get about one a year. Obviously, I'm in a dream. I realize it. I'm not waking up. Oh, I can do anything. I fly. And then we talked about flying through spaces. I actually used my mom's first townhome as an example. The first nightmare I remember may have involved lucid dreaming because it did involve flying, and I did get myself out of it. But yeah, I'd say about once a year I get them.
You said you did some mindfulness practices. You ever done any memory palace kind of work? Probably be really good at it. I think the big part of it is application. You know, if you want to memorize all of the state capitals or a bunch of digits of pi, that's an application you could pour work into, but there's not an easy way to encode information that isn't formatted specifically. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. How are you supposed to have a memory without being somewhere? Just like we can't think without language. You can't have a thought and that thought not contain some sort of linear words. Tend to think in your native language. I know that memory is attached a lot to the discussion of liminality as far as the mainstream goes. And I get that. It's nostalgia for a place you've never been. And this looks kind of like it. Or it gives you the same feeling as the school cafeteria on a Saturday, whatever. And I totally get that. For me, if I'm walking and a space whispers in my ear, that sounds kooky, but it says, hey, stop, look at me. It's usually a place that's not supposed to be seen, not supposed to be photographed. Most of the stuff that I photograph around town, all the stuff I photograph around town, is empty. It's vacant. It's dead. Downtown Birmingham is a commercial real estate graveyard, which is fantastic for people like me. It's seeable because all my photographs are taken from the street. I don't break in buildings. It's seeable, but it's not meant to be seen. And it has to sort of speak to me. It has to jump out at me in some way. But the vibe I get isn't really nostalgia. It's the lack of self. There's no people in my photos. There's no people in that building when I'm walking by. I'm not taking myself into any consideration. I don't care where I am in the space. I don't want to be represented in the space. I don't want anyone else to be represented in the space. I don't really care if I'm honest or good or technical about how I represent the space. It's just the space is there, whether I care or anyone cares or not. And for some reason, some spaces just bark out at you to grab them. I'm invisible along with this space being invisible at the same time. There's a meaninglessness there that's warm and comforting. No conversation has to take place. It doesn't have to remind you of anything. It doesn't have to have this cultural overlay. It's just dead. It's just there. No one's going to buy it. No one's going to rent it. Some of these spaces, I recently shot a space that I shot 10 years ago. It's next to Charm. It used to be the post office on 20th. It hasn't changed in 10, 15 years.
It's just sat.
It's just sat there. It looks exactly the same, which is fantastic. But it's dead. It's not bringing me into any particular aesthetic zone. And that's a zone in and of itself. You know, nothingness is something.
Which is different than like a gothic decay.
Absolutely. There's an aesthetic attached to that. There's baggage attached to that.
Even if you try to adapt it into like, postmodern urban gothic decay, there is a lack there that is the difference.
Sure.
Between like a mourning for something that's ruin.
Right. And I love photographing blight. I love photographing empty spaces. You know, someone has emptied out an area, turned it into a parking lot, but it was only a parking lot for 5 years, but it's been overgrown for 10, but no one wants to develop it. Okay, I'll photograph it. No one else thinks it has any meaning, but for whatever reason, when I'm walking by that block, it calls out to me and says, all right, just take a second, shoot around, walk around, which I'm getting better at walking into a space. Like I shot a tunnel down by Morris Avenue yesterday, and I was walking back to my office, and I stopped, and I was like, wait a minute, whoa. You just photographed a tunnel and took all these angles and got the light right, exposed your light setting based on the light at the other side of the tunnel, not on the light where I'm standing, did all this stuff. What, you're going to walk away and not walk down the tunnel?
Go in it, yeah.
What is wrong with you? So I walked through the tunnel. I'm getting a little bit better at that because I'm a cozy suburban person. I don't like being uncomfortable in a physical space.
Go in
the tunnel. So I'm trying to get a little bit better about that. When I'm on a walk about, there's been a few industrial spaces that I haven't broken into, but like, here's a fence. The fence isn't locked. Okay, I'll park my truck here. I'll walk up. I'm only going to be here for 10 minutes. I leave. No one notices. Mm-hmm. I'm getting a little bit better at doing that. I want to get better where I don't think about it. I just explore and I find the space as opposed to safely photographing on the sidewalk where I'm supposed to be. And the more I see my photos, even though I'm relatively happy with what's up there, I'm aware of where I was standing. Even though I'm trying to make myself and my point of view invisible, that's why I try to make all my structures perfectly up and down, no lens distortion. I do a lot of centering, a lot of symmetrical stuff, which is the opposite of what I do in graphic design. My graphic design is grungy and visceral and human and dirty and messed up, especially the type. My photographs are like almost like field studies.
Yeah.
Where it's perfectly symmetrical and it's uneasy how symmetrical it is. It's like, how much time did you spend making that symmetrical? The answer, a lot. I want to shoot fairly fast because I don't want to overanalyze it. And I want to shoot from a neutral position. Usually I'm using my wide setting on my camera. I've started orienting more toward portrait because it just looks better on Instagram versus landscape. That's changed a few things for me. I really want to get beyond that reasonable thing, which is documenting something from the center, being symmetrical, whatever. I want to get away from the safety of it. Mm-hmm. I want to take some chances, walk around. Obviously, I'm going to find more stuff that way. Birmingham is really photogenic, but it is limited. I want to get better at putting my physical body out in it. I feel more comfortable with those spaces the older I get, too. Like the last time I painted my guest room, I was like, I don't think I'm putting photos up. And then I carried a bunch of prints in there with the idea of putting them up, and that was 2 years ago, and they're still on the floor. I mean, that's just minimalism, clear space, clear mind, but I imagine stuff, even ideals, cleaner than I used to be. Used to be, give me plants and curtains and gear and coziness and big fluffy couches. But like I was so excited when I came in and I saw this setup. This is an ideal in a way. Now that I look back on it and I've talked to some people I've grown up with, we've talked about this sort of thing. I guess it goes back to the kinetic. Like I had a very kinetic upbringing. Mm-hmm. Whereas like my best friend was into Dungeons and Dragons, but I had no time for that. It just seemed too slow and contemplative. And why aren't you on your BMX bike with me? But I did have a phase where I convinced a couple of kids in my neighborhood, really the people who lived next door to me, and to a certain extent myself, that I was an alien. And of course that's an easy one to to put your finger on it. Your frontal lobe hasn't finished developing. Children are very self-oriented. There's plenty of people when they grow up, they assume that everyone in their life is a character who's sort of been hired to play that role. It's sort of this paranoid, narcissistic thing. But I did sort of develop a little bit of a backstory. Like, this is the planet I'm from, and when you see this thing blinking in the sky at night, it's this message. And I remember when I read Bowie's, one of his biographies, I think it's called Love and the Alien, he grew up near the Crystal Palace transmitter in London. Apparently used to think that it was sending him very specific David Bowie-only messages, and he developed a little bit of a narrative around that. So I guess maybe it's narcissism, child-based narcissism versus matched with boredom.
Right. It's just the extension of imagination into whatever it's going to
matched
find.
With being conceptual to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because Bowie had, his brother was intensely schizophrenic. Mm-hmm. Was hospitalized.
And died, like, fairly young, too, right?
Yeah, affected Bowie quite a lot. And I wonder how much of that, and he was very influenced by, like, William Burroughs, whose grasp on reality was pretty fluid. Bowie's talked a lot about the use of that creative kind of middle zone exacerbated by dissociative drugs or whatever, drawing the tree of life on things.
Right.
And, of course, there's a much broader conversation to be had about how we can do that with art, how we can do that with narrative space, the needing to inhabit. So on the one hand, you have memory, identity, placeness being grounded in inhabiting. What I wrote back here. Place is experiential, affective, and particular in time and space. But somehow we've still found this convoluted way, both culturally and like personally, emotionally, to take spaces that don't have any of those qualities and like reappropriate them. Mm-hmm. So I can't sensorily experience this imaginary place, but I can put myself there. Mm-hmm. And it's not temporal, even though who I am here now is imagining it here now. It's not a temporally determined space. Mm-hmm. In any context that I give it, I mean, it's still affected. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering what the limits, I guess, of active imagination can be. If there is a way to isolate or condense the imaginary and place it in a zone that is more fixed. Something like an ideal place, an ideal room of a specific designation that you give it. You can give it various aspects or stations or items or qualities or whatever that can give a character. Mm-hmm. You can impose a particularity on it. But then I wonder if there can be an active imagination brought into that allows spontaneity to interact with that imaginary stuff that is fixed. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. There is interplay there between like the poetics of space. Mm-hmm. Like you said, colors emerging out of imaginary spaces that don't necessarily have any kind of empirical or associative basis.
And real spaces. It's just something that jumps out. I think when I imagine a space or a place, I'm usually in motion, even though I'm not an in-motion person anymore. I don't usually imagine myself at a fixed point, looking around on a horizontal plane, left and right. I'm floating in from a slide from the ceiling, and then I'm going immediately to the floor. This is in dreams or just pondering, or you're zoning out doing your taxes, whatever. You're some kind of foggy state. I'm usually in some kind of motion, and I think that affects my ability. Obviously, this isn't tied to memory. This is imagination. That motion tends to not blur, but take away the opportunity for detail.
Right.
Whereas in memory, I remember being a kid sitting in this space, being a young adult sitting in this space. I remember when I first moved to Miami, and the first thing we did, because we had nothing but boxes, found a bar, and we did Jaeger shots and played pool, and we were like, wow, isn't this weird? We live in South Beach now. I still remember like the blueness of the light coming in, hitting the pool tables. So memory is detailed, but my imagination usually involves motion that sort of robs me of the detail, I think.
Right. Is it motion through a space that is stable?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Because I have the experience of like, I can try to put myself in a position in a room, but that room keeps like splintering or coming apart. So I wonder if the motion is a stabilizing aspect.
It could be. I never pondered an unstable room.
Right. I don't know if it's a neurological thing with me or if it's
I'm a
just
little
my
jealous.
own. It's not apprehendable to me in a stable way. If I try to visually lay out a room, it's very hard for me to hold it still and keep it cohered. But if I take all those details out and try to not see it, but just apprehend it as volume,
Sure.
and limit it, like an infinite plane demarcated almost arbitrarily.
Mm-hmm. I have in dreams and sometimes pondering real spaces of previous parts of my life. I guess it's usually when I'm dreaming about a real space. Let's say I'm 50 years old. I'm dreaming about the place where I lived in Central Florida when I was 12. The space makes complete sense in my dream. Everything I point to existed in reality. But in the dream, there's 3 extra rooms. It's kind of like a House of Leaves type thing. That happens a good bit, especially, again, in a foggy, in-between state. If I'm imagining a real space, sometimes there are appendages added to it that don't make any sense.
Do they have any kind of consistent, do they feel?
It's neutral. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just, I know that room's not actually there in a real space that I'm thinking about. But when I'm just kind of going through it in my mind, here's this extra guest room, here's this extra bathroom, closets.
Yeah, House of Leaves is one of those. And it's weird how much, if you start digging for this kind of content or media, there's a lot of it. I just found a manga that came out in the late 90s called, it's spelled Blame in English, but it's like Blam. And it's like this endless zone of machine replicated rooms that is like the size of Jupiter's orbit.
That's fantastic. There's so much interesting dread involved in all that. Like the widest extent, which I dip in occasionally to look at stuff, but the widest extent that the Backrooms has built itself up to be, how many hundreds of thousands of supposed square miles of hallways, it would totally make sense that there would be a story out there where it's the quote unquote back rooms or whatever you want to call that is like the size of a Dyson sphere.
That's essentially what this, it's just concentric Dyson spheres somewhere.
Completely makes sense. And there's like a dread aesthetic there that applies to one room that you can sit in, and it can also apply to infinite rooms. And it doesn't necessarily become all that more overwhelming because it was already dreadful and overwhelming to begin with, you know? It just becomes more interesting, a more interesting dread.
Yes. And ever more particular or ever more available to particular, no matter who you are, where you are, when you are, your culture has a weird room.
Right.
All the way back to pre-Neolithic.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if it is, I mean, again, we bring in memory and we bring in like religious habitation and like this is the space where the god lives, or this is like the ritual space where at only this time we are allowed to be under these conditions or whatever. That's almost an inversion, those two things.
It is.
Anywhere you are, this thing is just there for nothing, for no reason. It's not meant to be inhabited. It's not meant to be used, even if it's a leftover remnant of a like a commercial space, a useful space. It's all deprived. It's all dead, like you said.
That reminds me of a trip I took a couple of years ago to see my oldest, greatest friend down in Florida. It just so happened we couldn't meet up in 2020. And I used to go down there every summer for a week of vacationing. And it happened to line up that I was going to go down there and they were going to be renting a beach house in the Gulf in July of 2021. And I realized, wait a minute, July 2021, Gulf of Mexico, late July. That is exactly 500 years since the Calusa fought back against Ponce de Leon and effectively killed him, which was the first act of any consequence in the New World. Later on that same summer, Cortez took his men into the jungle to eventually usurp the Aztecs. Ponce de Leon's mission was completely subscribed to by the king. He had the people, the funds, the ships. He left from Havana, where it was expected that he was going to be the governor someday. Florida is essentially yours for the taking. Go take it. Versus Cortez took a bunch of men with him who went rogue, did this psycho mission to the jungle, and ended up being very successful. Whereas Ponce de Leon ended up getting injured by the Calusa, going back to Havana and dying. When we went to that vacation, down in, I guess it's Minnesota Key, or no, Stero Island. There's a little island in the inlet called Mound Key. It was the center of the kingdom of the Calusa. The reason it's a mound is because the Calusa kept throwing shells on it for a couple hundred years and built it up. Well, at the top of the mound, in the center of the kingdom, was this long house. At one end of the long house was Carlos, the king. That's what the Spanish called him. All the way through the rest of the length of the house were his court, regular people, contractors, fishermen, people coming for trade. Everyone was literally on a horizontal level playing field in that kingdom. So when these colonialists came to take over their stuff, and they didn't have a lot of stuff, they were spread out throughout South Florida. They didn't have big urbanized centers. They had these little fishing pods, little villages. They fought back on an equal playing field. The guys that were there near the camp with Ponce de Leon, who actually took on the attack to repel him, were just as important as the king, even though the king had obvious special privileges for marriage and this and that. But as a concept, they were equal. Versus the Aztecs, you've got the god tier, you've got the priest tier, their bougie tier, you've got the workers, then you have almost like an Indian caste system going below that, and then you had the completely expendable people. And they fell in a month. It's just interesting how this small place had its own sense of temple and worship and kingdom and access and lack of access, proximity, versus this golden city that just fell. And the whole time I was down there, I was pondering these two things during that summer and how wild that was. That the first item of consequence in the new world was with this tiny little nation of people in South Florida.
That's a fascinating comparison. Thank you for that. I was very curious as to where that was going.
Right.
And that's very interesting.
Well, you created a really strong visual for me that I hadn't thought about in a while of the segregated space. Like, here's the pure white space. Here's the unclean proletariat space where the actual work is done and people do their things. There's some of that's echoed in the Brutalist film too, because he's building sort of this quasi-Christian institution. So that segregation of light and space plays a role in that movie. It's interesting.
Yeah. Etienne Louis Boulet.
Oh, yeah.
The huge, megalithic, almost hypothetical spaces that were meant to evoke, almost meant to impress the purpose of civic spaces. Mm-hmm. Massive Hall of Justice built on top of a prison. And anyway, I'll link a much better explanation of some of that.
Triumph of municipality.
Yeah, that's well put. And municipality almost literally made into monolith. Mm-hmm. You familiar with Kowloon, the walled city?
Yes. The extremely dense one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like 10 square miles or something of, yeah.
Which is no longer, it was torn down or abandoned or...
Yeah, it was infiltrated and destroyed. The government deconstructed it.
Yeah. More of a structure than anything else. I mean, obviously the cultural, social, interactive dynamics inside I can't imagine because I'm an only child who grew up in a suburb. I remember thinking when I was first reading up on it, you have to almost think of it as a multicellular organism.
Yeah.
Unique to the planet, truly.
And there's something in that about how the horizontalness of, that is almost like a horizontal culture made cubic or vertical,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah. And the fact that it could operate, it could actually function. People would go to work and come home and then go shopping and then get their laundry done, all in the same complex. It's 4 different spaces.
Right. And somehow it didn't just result in a million dead ends.
Or murders. Or people just decompensating and it just, mayhem.
Kind of contradicts with the mouse utopia experiment. A fellow crowded a bunch of mice in over many, many generations into this environment where they weren't facilitated to live. Mm-hmm. And their population collapsed. Mm-hmm. And all of their social bioprocesses started failing because they couldn't modulate any of their behaviors. It was completely structured by their space. And of course, I mean, this was in the early 70s, I think. And everybody lost their shit because, population and overdensity, and it's just going to lead to rampant urban crime. And all it got taken in that direction.
Population bomb.
Yeah, as opposed to if you make spaces that are uninhabitable, then people can't live in them, which is the more natural conclusion from that, I think.
Or if you rarefy and privatize things to the extent where people have to scrape to get by on things that shouldn't be in a discussion, like water.
Yeah. Yeah. somehow the desolation and the dread still comes out into some kind of hope for we always have the capacity to recapitulate and repossess these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Maybe this is something that's been on my mind a lot as I've tried to cut back drinking. I've tried to cut back on doom scrolling. I've tried to cut back on just bad habits I guess I picked up during COVID, and bad habits I've just picked up over time. Trying to be more present, trying to read more, like actual books. Just the overall idea of creeping distraction, creeping lack of attention. I have ADHD, but I also have the ability to hyperfocus. And if I'm interested in something, you're not going to get in my way. I'm going to learn what I need to learn, and I'm going to have the discipline that's required to extract the data. But my own habits, the way the world is crashing around us, that's not promoting any less distraction. And sometimes I wonder, like, people who take the liminal aesthetic, I guess, in a more pure way or a more specific way. Like, I'm interested in buildings and scenic stuff and street photography and whatever. I kind of bounce around. But is that sort of a subconscious desire to reconnect to a lack of distraction? Because the aesthetic was born of a distracted culture, and it was propagated through distracted means. I mean, the back rooms didn't become this popular zeitgeist thing by way of books. It got there by YouTube. It got there by social media, 4chan, scrolling, and chats. That's what I see when I see quote-unquote typical liminal space photography. You're filling in your own blanks. Yes, it might be reminding you of something. Yeah, the colors might be hitting you a certain way. The treatment, if it's treated or not, post-processing, whatever. I see in that like a yummy, and I'm going to use the word yummy in its technical, institutional sense, a yummy lack of distraction. Now a commodity. That's a scarcity and a rarity, something that could probably be monetized more than it is. Hey, you want to be less distracted? You want to be more contemplative? You want to have more time staring off into a blank space and feeling good about it? Buy this product. But it seems implied in typical mainstream liminal space photography to me that there's not only something to ponder there, but there's something potentially desirable there. You're not going to be distracted.
Yeah. And you can easily see how that splinters off into like a fascist overturning of deprivation into purity.
Right.
Suddenly we regard empty shelves as a sign of good things somehow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in a similar way, I wonder if I largely agree with you. Like, we're seeing something that we actually desire and not just seeing an absence of something that we don't have.
That is what I was saying. I think you said it better than I did, and I can't back that up with anything. But doesn't it make sense? It's obviously desirable. I mean, they're making a film about it. It's very much in the global public sentiment just as an aesthetic right now. Even people who don't get involved in what is liminal photography, but just as an idea, someone who watches Severance once a week, like they get it.
Yeah. We're looking for something that transcends that, but employs it. Order and technique as opposed to product. I wonder if like the mall world or the liminal spaces and stuff like the back rooms are us trying to develop a substrate that we can start building that on top of or in. Like, we got to put it somewhere. We can't think of it abstractly, so we're trying to give it a space to be first, because that's where we have to start from.
It makes me want to dive back into like what the latest and greatest is on the back rooms. Spaces I haven't read up on the details of it, because there are so many.
I think the phenomenon has generated a recursive conversation that is now pointing in a bunch of different directions. People are more able to interact with these ideas like hypermodernity and like how we imbue that in space. God, there are going to be so many links on this episode. I can't even put links in my YouTube yet. It's just going to be a bunch of like nonsense.
We're looking at it from our point of view. Crashing empire, plenty of personal space, very temperate climate, reasonable air. The sky to us isn't a series of buildings and structure. Like, our point of view and the point of view of a lot of people, younger people, who created the back rooms and the stacking of the back rooms, they have a point of view that's valid, but what is someone's point of view in a heavily urbanized place? Like, what is Tokyo's input on this? What is someone in Russia's input on this? Someone living way up beyond the urban centers in Canada where they only see a person every 2 weeks.
Favelas in Brazil
Or on a small island where your concept of a horizon in a day and a night, in busy and not busy, or claustrophobic or open-ended, is completely different than someone living in the South or someone living in East Asia. But they're still going to bring something to the table. I'm assuming, first thing I'm going to do this weekend is I'm going to jump back into what is the state of the art of the back rooms right now. Surely that's come into play a lot, more than I even know. Like, I'm asking questions and I know that there's already answers out there to it.
There's definitely convergence there, like solar punk creators in Africa, or the professor that turned me onto that Blam comic is from University of Raal and is doing crazy, interesting work on all of this stuff. I would love to know those perspectives as well.
Absolutely. There is a quirky multiverse aspect to the back rooms that I appreciate. And there's also, do I want to go with cozy claustrophobia? I'm not sure. There are some back rooms that remind me of the little apartment that Bruce Willis is living in at the beginning of The Fifth Element. Mm-hmm. Like, it's tight and it's cozy, but it also feels like it's potentially modular. Like, if a construction company wanted to, like if he didn't pay his rent, they could just go in and pull the apartment out of the structure and take it away.
Yeah.
That's horrifying and delicious at the same time. I can't explain it. There's something about the coziness of living in this pod-like, almost insect-like community. You're not even a number, because that would require too many numbers.
Right. There are too many axes.
Right. You wish you were important enough to be a number in this society. That's very freeing. It frees you of so much. And I'm an only child. I'm an individual. I was raised to be an American, and I've been injected with certain individualistic ideals. But at the same time, the conceptual, artistic, aesthetic, spiritual freedoms that are on the other side of being nothing, invisible, and interchangeable.
That's always been the appeal of Hive.
Absolutely.
Collective, yeah.
And I get notions of that every now and then when I look at backroom stuff. Or a lot of backrooms tributes where they're not trying to be backrooms, but like, here's this thing that I did. This diagram came to me when I was at school. I sketched it out. It's 3 tiers. It's got a large parking garage. And like they go through the structure of it. I completely get the challenge and how satisfying that is to work on something like that. But also there's something satisfying in the containment. This is my containment. This is my uniqueness of my containment within this potentially infinite number of interchangeable containments. And how great is that? It's just, there's a weird, maybe it's oppressive, but there's a weird freedom to that.
Are you familiar with the Hilbert Hotel paradox?
The term rings a bell, but I don't think so.
I mean, David Hilbert was it's a monumental name in math in general and quantum physics, especially. The Infinite Hotel is where this show started, a TED video I saw, 11 years ago. And the conceit of it is essentially that you have an infinitely large hotel with infinitely many rooms, and they're all booked. One more person shows up and you have to find them a room. How do you do that? And that's like a very layperson entryway into like extremely dense math. The most initial conceit is that you move them all over +1. Mm-hmm. To get them to the end, to the last unfilled room will take forever. So you just have everybody make that one motion over. And you can stack that. A bus comes with 50 people. Mm-hmm. Infinitely many buses come. You can extrapolate that. I think what you're getting at is us trying to grasp infinitude.
Yeah.
And our particularity within not an abstract, it goes on forever that way and that way, but like everything is overdetermined. Talking about how Kowloon could have functioned. Everybody's lives interacted. Mm-hmm. And that overdetermination is a freedom. You're allowing really unseen forces to operate you. The
outside forces, as far as being an individual in a space, pondering, being one of many spaces, it's kind of a pull between overwhelm, anytime we contemplate hyper-urbanization, infinity, whatever, and comfort, which is what every human wants to be and feel 24 hours a day. Our ideal, we can slap a lot of terms on it and we can get really intellectual about it. But what we ultimately want is to feel comfortable. Not even necessarily happy, just comfortable. And the backrooms to me, or hyper-stacked gameplay, just these impossibly dense worlds, or even worse, an impossibly dense world that's inhabited by really large individual spaces where there's not even the luxury of feeling contained and claustrophobic. Every room is 20,000 square feet, and those are infinite. It's that push between overwhelm, conceptual limitations of being primates, where we really want to be, which is comfortable, and like sort of reclaiming it. I mean, that sounds really simple, almost disappointingly simple, but it's reclaiming the overwhelm. And for me, visually, holy crap.
It's so rich.
So rich. Yeah. So satisfying. Like, I didn't really look into the modern post 2022 backrooms thing since 2022 until I started doing this account at the beginning of this year, or I changed it over. I basically changed my graphic design account to this photography thing. And I revisited the quality of work, the imagination, just a typical day on like the Liminal Spaces Reddit. Obviously, there's some crappy stuff. There's plenty of AI, and there is some truly incredible stuff out there. Not only humbling aesthetically for someone who's trying to reestablish this visual relationship to things that I've been doing without thinking about it for 20 years, but also look how far I have to go. I mean, there is some really imaginative talent. There are people who see things even in their boring town at night. Everyone else is walking by, and they see this aloneness, this magical aloneness 2 blocks over from City Hall that no one has ever pondered, and they extract it out of nothing. And now I'm looking at it on Reddit 2,000 miles away, and aesthetically I'm just floored by it. And I'm looking at, a street light in the snow, or, something in the fog. And it's because the subject doesn't matter. It's the execution of that moment. So much void involved in it. So good. Another thing I hadn't thought of until this week is all the interviews I've ever done, podcasts, everything I've ever done has always been about music. Like, this is the first time I've ever sat down and talked to somebody about my visual stuff.
Yeah.
Like, somebody noticed and cared and had, was in the same town, and wow. I mean, thank you so much. Like, I didn't know that there was anything to examine until you messaged me. And in the past, few months, like, I've started getting a little momentum. I think I hit 2,000 this week, and I've started to connect with other photographers. It's interesting that there's something there. I didn't.
Oh yeah.
I didn't think enough, because when I switched over in January, I was pulling from old photos. So all I wanted to do was just take all this stuff from travel and downtown and whatever. Just, can I curate? Can I make this make sense? And then I started re-photographing things downtown again. And I realized, oh my God, I'm so addicted to this. And it became an obsession for a while. Like, I had to step back from photographing empty spaces for a while because I just had too much content of that same point of view. I had to mix it up. There is something to talk about.
Yeah.
Here.
It's good. It's good stuff. I mean, I've seen a ton of liminal space content.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
it means so much to me, because again, I feel comfortable and I've enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah.
But also I'm kind of scared to death because no one ever asked me to talk about visual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was telling Jody recently, I told him I was coming on here, and I was like, I'm going to plug you. You got to get on this. It's cool. We've worked on a lot of album covers together. A lot of really crazy, weird dioramas and just really good stuff. It's all at the bottom of the page. I've come away over the years, let's say the last 20 years, happier about my album covers than the album. And I've never been able to express that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to say that in an interview in Chattanooga or Atlanta about an album that's coming out, or we're in town playing a show, promoting an album. Hey, let's talk on the radio for a minute, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to say what I'm subconsciously thinking, which is, I love the album. I love everyone who played on the album. I love what we learned. I love the lyrics. But man, I'm so satisfied with that album cover.
musician. Axe handles cut from trees. Mother Mary's radio silent. Head spinning, turning cheeks. Love without a name. Love without a name. Love without a name. Love without a name. In perpetual motion. In perpetual motion. Spirit of the staircase for escape to the modern age. The blood banqueting room turnips, that's love on parade. Wisdom teeth and high-heeled girls, the sun-kissed brains of kings. Broken systems, spilling silence. Love on parade. What we were was what we are now. Love without a name. Love without a name. What we were is what we are now. Love without a name. Love without a name. What we were is what we are now. Love without a name. Love without a name. What we were is what we are now. Love without a name. Love without a name. What we were is what we are now. Love without a name. Love without a name. What we were is what we are now. Love without a name. Love without a name.
The Earth Hotel is a production by Jackie Cotillard, the individual and named collaborators. All contents included are done so under fair use and with permission. The ideas and opinions expressed here not necessarily reflect those of Jackie Cotillard, the Earth Hotel, or associated parties, nor do they reflect those of guests or contributors prior or future. All music, words, and otherwise not cited as authored elsewhere are creations of Jackie Cotillard and remain the intellectual property thereof. Unauthorized use strictly prohibited. The Earth Hotel, all rights reserved, 2014, updated 2024.